The thorax is the upper part of the trunk of the human body. It contains the heart, lungs, trachea, esophagus, and major blood vessels. The rib cage and muscles of the chest and back provide protection and support to the organs of the thorax. In our lecture, we will focus on the articulations of the thorax. The articulations of the thorax refer to the joints between the various bones that make up the thorax, including the sternum, ribs, and thoracic vertebrae. These joints play an important role in movement and posture, allowing for the smooth and efficient movement of the thorax. The thorax, also known as the chest region, serves as a protective barrier for the heart and lungs, which are critical organs in the body. They also play a significant role in maintaining proper posture and spinal alignment, which can affect the health and well-being of the individual. The joints in the thorax are specially designed to allow a range of movements that are essential for breathing, reaching, twisting, and bending. Before talking about the thorax articulation, let's go through the bones of the thorax first. The sternum, also known as the breastbone, is a long, flat bone located in the center of the thorax, in front of the thoracic vertebral column. It serves as a point of attachment for several muscles involved in breathing and helps protect the organs in the thorax. The sternum is made up of three parts: the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process. The manubrium is the upper part of the sternum and is the thickest and widest part. The body is the middle part of the sternum and is the longest and narrowest part. The xiphoid process is the smallest and narrowest part of the sternum and is located at the inferior end of the body. The sternum is attached to the ribs on either side through the costal cartilage and helps to form the rib cage, which protects the heart and lungs. This attachment takes place because the body of the sternum comprises 4 parts or sternebrae, which fuse between 15 and 25 years of age. The body of the sternum is the part between 2 joints: manubriosternal joint between the manubrium and body, and xiphisternal joint between the xiphoid and the body. On the lateral sides, the body of the sternum has facets for articulation with the 2nd to 7th costal cartilages. You can see here the 2nd costal cartilage notch, 3rd costal cartilage notch here, the 4th costal cartilage notch, this one, the 5th costal cartilage notch. Here is the 6th costal cartilage notch, and lastly, the 7th costal cartilage notch, where it articulates with the 7th costal cartilage. In addition to its role in anatomy, the sternum is also involved in several medical conditions, such as sternal fractures, which occur after a traumatic injury to the chest. Now let's talk about the ribs that give the thorax its cage-like appearance. The ribs are a series of curved bones located in the thorax that encase and protect the organs in the chest, including the heart, lungs, and major blood vessels. They also serve as attachment sites for several muscles involved in breathing and posture. The human body has a total of 12 pairs of ribs, each with distinct characteristics and functions. In this illustration, the first 10 pairs of ribs are labelled, followed by the 11th and 12th ribs. The first 7 pairs of ribs are known as true ribs, as they attach directly to the sternum through their own costal cartilages. The next 3 pairs are called false ribs, as they attach indirectly to the sternum, usually through a common costal cartilage. The final 2 pairs of ribs are called floating ribs, as they do not attach to the sternum at all. You will be able to appreciate the 11th and 12th ribs, also called the floating ribs, in this 3D model of the thorax. As you can see, their name floating ribs come from the fact that these ribs do not attach to the sternum. The ribs are made up of several parts, including the head, neck, tubercle, and shaft. The head of the rib is a rounded portion that articulates with the vertebrae in the back, while the neck is a narrow region that connects the head to the shaft. The tubercle is a small bony prominence that serves as a site of muscle attachment, and the shaft is the longest part of the rib that runs along the sides of the thorax. The shape and curvature of the ribs play an important role in breathing and chest expansion. During inhalation, the rib cage expands, and the ribs elevate, increasing the volume of the chest cavity and allowing for the intake of air into the lungs. During exhalation, the rib cage contracts and the ribs descend, reducing the volume of the chest cavity and forcing air out of the lungs. Overall, the ribs are a crucial part of the anatomy of the thorax, playing an important role in breathing, posture, and protection of the organs in the chest. The thoracic vertebrae are a series of 12 vertebrae located in the middle part of the vertebral column in the thorax region. They are larger and stronger than the cervical vertebrae in the neck and the lumbar vertebrae in the lower back, and play an important role in protecting the spinal cord, supporting the rib cage, and facilitating the movement of the torso. Each thoracic vertebra has several unique features that distinguish it from other vertebrae in the vertebral column. The thoracic vertebrae are unique in that they have facets, or shallow depressions, on the sides of the vertebral body that articulate with the heads of the ribs. They have a slightly convex anterior surface and a concave posterior surface, as well as a large spinous process that extends posteriorly and serves as a site of muscle attachment. You can also see the inferior articular process of thoracic vertebrae. These processes form joints with the adjacent vertebral bodies, allowing for movement and stability in the thoracic spine. From this angle, the larger part of the vertebrae is called its body. There is also the superior articular process, which forms a joint with the adjacent vertebral body, allowing for movement and stability in the vertebral column. And the transverse costal facet is a bony surface found on the transverse process of a thoracic vertebra. It is located on the lateral aspect of the transverse process and articulates with the head of a rib. From the superior aspect, you can see the transverse processes, which are bony projections on either side of the vertebral body, also serve as sites of muscle attachment and provide stability to the thoracic vertebral column. And the vertebral foramen, a large circular opening in the center of each vertebral body. It houses and protects the spinal cord and its associated nerve roots. There is also the superior articular facet found on the superior aspect of a vertebral arch, also known as the lamina, which articulates with the inferior articular facet of the adjacent vertebra, allowing for movement and stability in the vertebral column. In addition to their role in the thoracic region, the thoracic vertebrae also play an important role in breathing, as they help to control the movement of the rib cage during inhalation and exhalation. Overall, the thoracic vertebrae are a critical part of the anatomy of the thorax, playing an important role in supporting the rib cage, protecting the spinal cord, and facilitating the movement of the torso. These three bones form the thoracic skeleton together. The rib cage is made up of 12 pairs of ribs that attach to the thoracic vertebrae in the spine. The thoracic vertebrae are the 12 vertebral bodies in the middle of the spine that help to provide stability and support for the rib cage. One end of the ribs articulates with the thoracic vertebrae and the other articulate with the sternum. Now that we have talked about the bones of the thorax, let's talk about the articulations, or the joints of the thorax. The joints of the thoracic cage include the manubriosternal joint, xiphisternal joint, sternocostal joint, costochondral joint, interchondral joint, costovertebral joint, and costotransverse joint. I already mentioned two joints when talking about the manubrium. The manubriosternal joint. It is a cartilaginous joint between the manubrium and the body of the sternum. It is in fact a symphysis joint, meaning the ends of the two bones involved in the formation of these joint is covered by a layer of hyaline cartilage. At the manubriosternal joint, only a small amount of angular movement is possible during respiration. Next up, we have the xiphoid joint. It is a cartilaginous and symphysial joint between the xiphoid process and the body of the sternum. Typically, the xiphoid process fuses with the sternum in middle age. Now let's talk about the sternocostal joint. It is also known as the chondrosternal joints. Sterno is for the sternum and costal from the costal cartilage. So, it's the joint between the sternum and the costal cartilage. The first sternocostal joint is a primarily cartilaginous joint between the manubrium and the first costal cartilage and does not allow for movement. This helps in the stability of the shoulder girdle and of the upper limb. The second to seventh costal cartilages form synovial joints with the sternum, which include a cavity filled with synovial fluid and are lined by a synovial membrane. These joints, except for the second one which is double, have a single synovial joint. Next is costochondral joints. Costochondral joints are the joints between the costal cartilage of a rib and the sternum, which are the primary cartilaginous joints. No movement is possible here. Interchondral joints are the synovial joints located between the costal cartilages of the 8th, 9th, and 10th ribs. The name interchondral comes from the Latin inter, meaning between, and chondral, meaning of cartilage. Do not confuse these two joints, as the costochondral joints are the joints between the rib and the sternum, while interchondral joints are the joints between the costal cartilages themselves. These were the joints formed at the anterior aspect of the thorax. We will now look at the joint involving the thoracic vertebrae. The costovertebral joints are comprised of two synovial joints. The head of a typical rib forms two synovial joints by articulating with its own vertebra and the body of the next higher vertebra. These joints are separated by an intra-articular ligament that is attached to the ridge on the head of the rib and the intervertebral disc. The first and 10th to 12th ribs have a single synovial joint with their corresponding vertebral bodies. Other supporting structures of the joint include a capsular ligament and a triradiate ligament, with the upper ligament attached to the vertebra above and the lower ligament attached to the vertebra below. The middle band of the triradiate ligament creates the hypochordal bow, linking the joints on both sides. As for the costotransverse joints, These are synovial joints that form from the articulation between the facets on the rib tubercle and the transverse process of its corresponding vertebra. If we look at the thoracic vertebrae from this angle, here you can see the third costotransverse joint. Here is the head of the fourth rib articulates with the fourth and third vertebrae. So those were the two joints of the thoracic cage with the vertebrae. Costovertebral joint is between the ribs and the body of the vertebrae, while the costotransverse joint is the one between the tubercle of the rib and the transverse process of the vertebrae. The best way to memorize all the articulations of the thorax is to start from the middle and move outwardly. What I mean is that first, we have the two joints involving the central bone of the thorax, the sternum. We have the manubriosternal joint and xiphoid joints. The next one, slightly on the outer side, is the sternocostal joint. Then we have the joints that involve the costal cartilages. They are costochondral joint and interchondral joint. And of course, the two joints with the vertebra that we have already discussed, the costovertebral joint and costotransverse joint. And that concludes our video lecture on thoracic articulations. We hope you have a better understanding of the bony structures and joints that make up the thoracic cage and allow for movement and stability in the chest.
Watch our medical videos anytime and anywhere. Download sqadia.com app now.